All right, let's welcome Kute Blackson to the show. Thank you so much for showing up today. I really appreciate it. Um, Not a lot of my listeners are going to know who you are, right? Some
Sure.
of them will, but not everybody. So you explain to me kind of how you got into the space. Because
Mm.
I was joking in the beginning before we went on. I said, unless you were 4 years old and knew this is what you wanted to do your whole life. And you said, I kind of have a story like that. So what's that story?
Yeah, look, I was born in Ghana, West Africa. My father's from Ghana. My mother's Japanese. I grew up in London. I now live in the US, partly in Mexico, and I feel like I'm a citizen of the world. And yeah, my story is when people often ask, how did you get into this field of personal development and coaching and teaching and seminars and writing books? Um, as a kid growing up in London, I had to move from Ghana because of a political coup. And we ended up getting smuggled into basically London and couldn't go back to Ghana. And so from the youngest time, I was a very empathetic kid, and I would feel people's feelings and emotions, and I feel people suffering very deeply. And it wasn't a conscious thing, but there was always a part of me that wanted to alleviate people's suffering. I didn't know how, I didn't know what that would look like. I just felt people. And um, my first memories as a kid was literally seeing. I remember being a chubby kid lost in the crowd, seeing a crippled woman crawling on the floor. She picks up the sand that this man walks on, wipes it on her face, and stands up. You could call that a miracle. I grew up seeing blind people see and deaf people hear, and people stand up out of wheelchairs. The same man whose sand she picked up would look at a woman in a wheelchair and say, "Why are you in this wheelchair? You're not sick. Stand up." I would literally see a person come in with crutches, and the same man would look at a person with crutches and say, "Let those crutches go. Do you believe?" And they would start running around the room as though they'd been walking for 10 years. And so this man was my father. I grew
Okay.
up, and so he built 300 churches in Ghana, West Africa, a very spiritual, mystical, kind of metaphysical man. Went to India in the 60s and had some certain kind of enlightenment experiences. So I grew up in a very spiritual environment. My father was Christian, my mother was Buddhist. That's a whole nother trip. And so I grew up in this environment that on some level people say, wow, that is so weird, it's so different, it's so unusual. But sometimes people didn't even believe me growing up, yet I saw this with my own eyes. No cameras, no TV, no social media, just every day. So for me, it felt very normal. It felt very matter of fact. It honestly didn't feel that special. A person standing up, a person getting healed, an incurable disease. It felt very normal. So my father was considered the miracle man of Africa. What was beautiful, I think, was because it felt normal, I grew up with the sense that anything was possible, that there were no limits, that literally there were no limitations to what was possible in life. And it didn't seem that much of a stretch. And so when I was age 8, my father built a huge church in London, about 5,000 people every Sunday. He had hundreds of thousands of followers in Ghana, West Africa. When I was age 8, I started speaking in my father's churches. My father just threw me in the audience one day and said, "Speak." That began my speaking career. Age 14. And also, as a kid, I was very precocious because in my father's church, a lot of folks weren't that educated, didn't have a lot of money, yet seemed and had every reason to not be happy, but seemed to be fulfilled and happy for some reason with nothing. A very generous people. Yet I went to a school, I got a scholarship to a very prestigious school. We didn't have a lot of money. I went there for free. And I was around prime ministers' kids and politicians' kids and people of great wealth. And they had every reason to be happy, but seemed to be miserable. And so as a young boy, I began to also ask myself the question, like, wait a second, this doesn't make sense. What's the purpose of life? Is it just to wake up, go to work, have babies, buy a car, buy a house, go on vacation, and then die? Like, surely there has to be more to life than that. What is the purpose of life? Who am I? Why am I here? Where am I going? What is this all about? What is the nature of reality? And so I began to ask myself these questions. And so when I was age 14, my father basically suddenly announced one day to the congregation that my son is taking over my ministry. So I was speaking every month, every 6 weeks, every few months in my father's church, and he just announces, unbeknownst to me, we didn't have a conversation. I love my father, but we weren't very close. He was this sort of iconic guy, and he was old school from the standpoint of it's my way or it's my way, you choose. And so when he announced to the congregation that my son is taking over, I knew something was off. I knew, like, my heart sank because I knew that this was not my path. I knew that this was not my destiny. I knew that this was not why I was born. I felt a calling to go in a different direction. And I didn't say anything because, like any kid who wants his father's love, I was too afraid. My fear was, if I dared to be myself, if I dared to speak my truth, if I dared to really show the world and my father and people who I really am, I won't be loved. And I think so many of us as human beings in this human experience, we let fear hijack us. We're afraid to be who we truly are because we're afraid that we won't be loved, and we hide who we are. We hide our gifts. We hide our talents. We hide our creativity. We don't share and fully express ourselves out of fear, and we seek validation. And so for 4 years, I said nothing and I went along with it. Became ordained, became a minister, took on responsibility. Yet in my heart, I knew that something was off. In my heart, I knew that something wasn't quite aligning, wasn't quite real, wasn't quite authentic. And so when I turned 18, I felt this calling, basically, to come to America. I wanted to come to America, specifically Southern California, because all of in my father's bookshelf, he had literally thousands of books, from religious to spiritual to mystical, like Eastern mystics, people like Krishnamurti and Osho and Yogananda, to Western, spiritual sort of self-help teachers, Wayne Dyer, Louise Hay, Marianne Williamson, to motivational people like Brian Tracy and Zig Ziglar and Tony Robbins. And so as a kid, I grew up reading these books. I became obsessed with these books. From probably age 8 to 18, I must have read 700-800 books in my spare time, just devouring this information. So I became obsessed with this stuff. And as I read this stuff, I began to see that, wow, maybe there's a different way I can help people. Maybe there's a different way. I don't have to do it through the church. I can, Tony Robbins, Deepak Chopra, Louise Hay, Zig Ziglar, like, they're doing it in hotel rooms. They're doing it in seminars, and they all live in Southern California. And so I wanted to come to Southern California. This felt like the promised land, the Mecca, and Northern California too. A bunch of them lived. And so I wanted to come to California, go into this field, learn from some of them, study with some of them, and write books. And so it was always a vision of mine, always a passion. It was something I felt. So at 18, I felt this undeniable calling. And sometimes what your soul guides you to do won't always make sense to your conscious mind, and certainly won't always be convenient. And I felt this calling to come to America. And I looked into my future. It was a moment of decision. And I think our life is shaped in the moments of decisions we make. And I looked into my future, and I realized that I didn't have a choice. I knew what I had to do, which was speak to my father, confront my father, reclaim my life, which honestly was terrifying, and it was scary. Sometimes we're taught, or we're taught in these books, like, have no fear, be fearless. I was terrified. I think sometimes when you know what you must do with your life, when you know what your purpose is, it doesn't get less scary. It gets more scary, because you're forced to stretch outside of your comfort zone and do what you haven't done and become who you currently are right now. And so I looked into my future, and I saw that I could be successful by everyone else's standards. I could take over my father's church, take that to the next level, achieve success. But if I didn't have myself, if I didn't have my soul, if I didn't have my own integrity, what kind of success is that? And I projected into my future, age 20, age 30, age 40, age 50, age 60. I felt such a pain in my heart, because I knew this was not true. I knew this was not right. I felt like I was committing a soul suicide, and I knew what I had to do. And so at 18, I made a decision that changed my life. I finally, for the first time, confronted my father, who was not an easy person. I looked him in the eyes with a lot of grief, because I knew I would be breaking his heart. And sometimes to follow your own truth, you have to break the hearts of those around you, and I knew that I couldn't truly be fulfilled and happy living someone else's life. I couldn't be truly fulfilled and happy being someone that I'm not. And so I looked him in the eyes and I said, Dad, I'm not taking over. With great terror, trembling, I said, I'm not taking over your ministry. I love you. And he said, are you sure? And I said, yes. And that was it. We didn't speak for 2 years. It was challenging. It was difficult. But I really believe that, and I've seen it throughout my life, I believe that when you follow your inner knowing, when you follow your inner genius, when you follow your soul, when you follow your deep guidance, and you don't compromise your truth, you don't compromise your truth or betray yourself, and you follow that inner knowing, I really, really am a believer that you will always end up in the right place. Maybe the route that you take isn't what you expect. Maybe you may not end up where you expect, but you'll always end up in the right place. And so I didn't compromise. We didn't speak for 2 years. It was difficult. It was challenging. I was thrown into a desert darkness, so to speak, where I felt like I was following my soul. I was following my truth. Yet now I was just floating. No college degree, no support from my family except my mother, no money, no specific skills. What the hell am I going to do with my life? And I remember saying a prayer to the universe, and I said, God, I'm following my soul. I'm following what's true. But now I'm just like, I'm literally free falling in the middle of darkness. Like, if any of these self-help books have worked, I need to know right now. Kid you not, that day I was in the library of my school. Someone hands me a magazine randomly called The Economist. I'd never read this magazine. I look in the back. I always say life gives clues, and I felt something. So I looked in the back of this magazine, and it says the American government is giving away 55,000 green cards in the DV1 green card lottery. I felt chills in my body. I knew I was going to win. Long story short, through a law firm, I entered it. 3 months later, and I was told that unless by September the 18th, you're notified by the government, that's it. Move on with your life. Every day, I'm expecting to win. I'm visualizing. I'm holding positive intentions. I literally cut out a piece of paper, colored it green, wrote my name on it, visualized the President of the United States welcoming me to the US. Every day, nothing, until September the 18th. And I heard nothing even that day. I decided that I was going to come to America, 2 suitcases with no green card, and just show up, basically, And that night, we got a phone call from a law firm. My mother hands me the phone. There's this American voice on the other line, and he says, "Is this Mr. Blackson?" I said, "Yes." He says, "Look, we're the law firm that applied for you for the green card. You've won a green card." And I was celebrating and shocked and stunned and jumping around. And in that moment of jubilation, I heard this voice that said, "Why do you seem so surprised? You knew you were going to win. Did you lose faith?" And I almost gave up. And I think so many of us as human beings, when things don't go according to plan, or when our dreams don't manifest, we go into a dark night. And when we can't see the light, we want to give up. And so many of us, we end up giving up and throwing in the towel before the moment of breakthrough. But often before the breakthrough is a breakdown, and I had a breakdown moment. And yet it was like life reminding me, that I was on the right path. And that's what brought me to the US. 2 suitcases, $800, 1 suitcase full of clothes, another suitcase full of self-help books with $800 in my pocket, following a dream, landed in Los Angeles, went to Venice Beach, cried for 6 months because I knew no one, and wanted to go back every moment. But that began my life. And went and found many of the teachers and the mentors, the Jack Canfields, the Mark Victor Hansons, the Deepak Chopras of the world, studied with some of them. After a few years, kind of got myself on my feet, and then ended up traveling. Went to Israel, studied with rabbis, went to Thailand, studied with monks, walked the Camino, 900 kilometers in northern Spain.
Yeah, I did the Camino de Santiago.
Yeah. And went just in search of answers, and ended up in India. And that's what really transformed my life and myself. And I came back to the US with a vision to help people and coach people. And I started working with people one-on-one, and it just ended up one-on-one, and another person's life changed, one person's life changed. And I really was able to turn this guy's life around kind of very intuitively. This is when my coaching career really started 20 years ago, when my neighbor brought her ex-boyfriend to my doorstep. And she says, "Look, this is my ex-boyfriend. We're not together, but I love him. He just lost $250,000. This is 20 years ago in Las Vegas. Literally in 2 days, he's addicted to alcohol, prostitutes, heroin, cocaine, weed. I mean, you name it, he's addicted, and he's a train wreck, and he's a gambler, and he's going down the toilet. Can you help him?" I wasn't quite sure, but all I heard come out of my mouth was yes. And I ended up realizing that the way I had started coaching people wasn't going to work. So I was going to have to innovate a new method of coaching someone who was like this in trouble. And I ended up working with him for a month, and I created a method of working with him that in 1 month literally transformed his life. He got sober, he got clean, he got his head straight. 6 months later, ended up meeting a beautiful woman, getting engaged, getting married. I mean, his life changed. And so that one experience made me think, wow, if this guy's life changed that much with the intensive way I worked with him, because I thought he needed something intensive, what if I worked with everybody this way, in this intensive way? And so I created a coaching process before coaching was popular, and I called it uncoaching. And I would tell people, so people might say, well, what do you do? I don't coach people. I don't teach people. I don't train people. I uncoach, I unteach, I untrain. I help uncondition you from the patterns of conditioning that we all learn to develop from childhood, from traumas, from growing up with our parents, society, media, religion, education system. And so we're all conditioned in some way and often don't know it. We think that who we are is who we are, but it's just who we've been conditioned to be. And so I help people become aware of their conditioning and unravel those layers of conditioning so that you can connect with your authentic self, your true nature, and live that fully and freely in the world. And so after he transformed,
stop right there for a second.
Yeah.
All right. I need to ask questions. All right. All right. So when you're up to this point, when you were traveling all over,
sure.
How did you eat? Where did you sleep? All that, because when you get to Southern California, yeah. Well, when you get to Venice Beach, right?
Yeah.
I know Venice Beach. All right. I lived down in San Diego for 18 years, lived in LA for a year. I know all over because I used to travel all over down there. You didn't sleep outside.
Yeah. So when I first came to the US, I had $800, maybe $1,000, but no more than that. And the first place I landed.
I mean, don't get me wrong. What you do is amazing, but I want more to the story.
Of course. Yeah. No, I love it. I love it. Anything you want to speak about. So when I land, I'm 18 years old. I asked literally knew nobody. And I asked the shuttle bus guy to take me somewhere safe and cheap. I had no idea. It takes me to freaking Venice Beach back, 20 years ago when it was not the hip place it is now. And it was rough. I ended up staying in this place called, very cheap place, a dorm. I didn't know, but it was called Venice Beach Hotel on Wynwood Avenue. I stayed there until I figured shit out. I ended up getting an apartment for literally $240, $50 a month in Koreatown when it wasn't fancy. Had a $250 a month rent and began my life. I was washing dishes. I literally had no.
You did whatever you needed to do.
I was stealing food from the supermarket. I took a mattress out of the trash and I was sleeping on a mattress that was in the trash. Just excited to be in America. And so.
Right.
And what I really did was, I was doing whatever I needed to do. And things really kind of changed 6-7 months later because I got involved with multi-level marketing. And it was so bizarre because I went to this business conference to try to live the American. It was one of those real estate seminars where they teach you how to make money with no money down, which most time is BS. So I go there, I'm like, I have no money and I can't even. They're trying to upsell me a package. I leave. The next day, I get a phone call at one of those landlines. This woman says, I met you at this conference. I got your business card. I'm like, well, I don't have a business card. And she pitches me on her multi-level marketing deal. I'm like, an insurance multi-level? I didn't come to America to be an insurance agent. And so I tell her what my dream is, which is to go into self-help. And I want to meet Les Brown and Zig Ziglar, Jim Rohn, Mark Victor Hansen, Jack Canfield, Stephen Covey. She says, I have a friend who's involved with a new multi-level marketing company called the People's Network, TPN. And all of those people you mentioned are part of this is before YouTube. They're a part of the faculty that teach on a satellite-based TV network dedicated to personal growth. I'm going to introduce you to
that network. I know that network.
See? Jeff Olson, Eric Worre. And so I was pre-launch. I was one of the first folks that literally signed up as a distributor. The challenge is I didn't have any money. And so the story is basically the woman who sponsored me, who called me up, was a friend. This woman invites me to a meeting. I look at her, Pamela. I say, Pamela, I want to sign up, but I have no money. And she looks this is where moments of grace happen in one's life. She looks at me and she says, something about you. I believe in you. I'm going to loan you this $500 so you can sign up and get your package. Make sure you pay me back, but I'm going to believe in you. Don't let me down. And so I was so inspired that I didn't know that for multi-level marketing, you need to know people. I didn't know anyone. So what did I do? Two things. I had one suit. I'd go along Wilshire Boulevard. I'd ride up and down elevators. And all day long, I would harass people like you in elevators, trying to sign you up for this multi-level marketing deal. And I would break people down. I'd see the same people for like 30 days in a row. Eventually, after 30 days, they'd give up and they'd come to the meeting and they were just sold on my excitement. And then I also just started cold calling people. I was given a list of bitter multi-level marketing people that were burned in multi-level marketing. And my upline gives me this list. I didn't know better. I just start calling these people. I'm getting cursed out of 700 phone calls. Literally, I start signing up people and it just kind of exploded. And that's what also helped me a little bit, began things started taking off kind of. And through that, I met Jim Rohn. I met Jim Rohn's promoters. I met Brian Tracy's seminar promoters, and I started promoting seminars for these guys, and they taught me the ropes of promoting seminars, and just things kind of evolved from there. So yeah, the first few years I was hustling.
So you said this was 20 years ago? Not 25 years ago?
25, yeah, 25.
Okay.
No, when I first came, it was about 25 years ago.
Yeah, when this all was going on, the multi-level. Because I remember a friend of mine, he started that kind of stuff. I remember that whole program. And because I've been in the mortgage industry for 22 years, so I've been in San Diego, and that's where I learned all this stuff. But some people I knew, they did that kind of stuff, and there's nothing wrong with multi-level marketing if it works for you.
Nothing at all. Nothing.
All right, so you fast forward to where we were talking before I interrupted you. Yeah. Basically, you helped this person and you came up with this uncoaching. Are you still doing that type of coaching now, or what are you doing now?
I've worked with people from all walks of life. I only take for one-on-one. I used to do a lot of one-on-one. In fact, a lot of my clients about 20 years ago were in the real estate industry. We're talking about real estate agents, Century 21, Remax, Coldwell Banker, mortgage brokers. Used to have a lot of mortgage brokers, and they would come to me because they would say, Kute, I don't know why I'm stuck. I know what to do. I procrastinate. I sabotage. They had all the information. They went to Mike Ferry and they had all of this real estate knowledge, but they weren't producing at the level that they needed to produce at, and they weren't sure why. And so they'd end up coming to me. And so I started working with a lot of people many years ago. For many years, I work with 10, 15, 20 clients a month. And so now I only take on a few select clients one-on-one, and it's small groups now, large groups, small groups. My smallest group I do is 18 to 20 people in Bali, where I take people really deep. 100 people, 200 people, 300 people, 500 people. So it just depends. And so now it's just evolved, right, where the essence of my work, which is all about uncoaching people and helping people become aware of the patterns of their conditioning, the essence is still the same. I just create it for different levels and scale.
All right. So what's the perfect client for you? Because for me, right, I have a perfect client, but it doesn't mean I get them all the time. But for me, what I love to do is I love talking to people and getting in other sandbox and understand what you come. What is that perfect? I mean, they're not. I mean, where do you like?
Honestly, it depends. But look, Inc. magazine called me the mindfulness guru for the billionaires. There was an article done on me and my work because I have been known to work with a lot of very high level. This is not the only client I work with.
I understand.
But I've been known to work. I worked with about 20 billionaires in a few years, and the word started spreading. And they would come to me because they seem to have everything and every reason to be happy. And sometimes when you achieve what you thought was going to make you happy and you're still not happy, it's even more depressing. Because when you're going up the mountain and you're chasing that carrot, thinking it's going to make you happy, thinking that billion's going to make you happy, thinking getting that jet and what have you is going to make you happy. Now you have it, and you have no reason. What now? And I think a sense of hopelessness and sometimes depression sets in. And so a lot of these people would come to me and they would say, Kute, I have every reason to be happy. And I have the house, the wife, the car, the this, the that, and I'm miserable. I'm not happy. And a lot of them, they weren't truly living their authentic purpose. A lot of them had a lot of fears, and even though they had money and fame and what have you, they were still stuck in fears. They were still stuck in scarcity. What had driven them to succeed, which was their pain, which was their inadequacy, which was some of their childhood stuff and wanting to prove, like insecurities, just the fact that they made money didn't make them any less insecure. It didn't heal the sort of underlying pain that drove and motivated them in the first place. And so what I really got good at doing, I wouldn't help them make more money. What I really got good at doing was really helping them get in touch with the deeper underlying core issues and patterns that were keeping them stuck. And so that became, I wouldn't say my ideal client, but a client I really loved working with, because I was able to very clearly identify their core pain and help them heal that underlying pain inside. And then one reason I love working with such a client is because as they transform themselves from the inside out, and then came into a sense of wholeness and fulfillment, they had a level of platform and structure and resources to then be able to, from a more elevated state of consciousness, to go out and use their resources to affect change and do good in the world. And so for me, that was very rewarding to do and work with clients like that.
Excuse me. That's amazing. But I noticed that a lot of people, you were talking about brokers and real estate, and that's anybody they get to a certain level and then they can't go any further because they have stuff that is controlling them. But when you're talking about, people, they weren't happy when they acquired everything. I mean, the rule of thumb is, money doesn't make you happy. You just have some really nice toys, but you're still unhappy with them. And until you figure out what is wrong, because a lot of times people who are really focused and do certain things have issues that they haven't dealt with. Exactly. And they need to deal with those issues. But those issues is what made them so great at getting to where they are at the top, that if they didn't have those issues, they probably wouldn't have been at the top.
Yeah, it's possible. It's possible. And
I'm not saying, because most people need the help after they get there. Right?
Yeah.
Once they find out what they're doing, once I achieve this level, I'll be good. Once I achieve this level, I'll be even happier. But I understand what you're getting at, because we all have issues from our childhood that we never dealt with, that we don't realize. And how that comes up for me and how I know that is because I do another podcast called Helping the Brave, which is helping veterans once you take the uniform off. And a lot of those guys have demons before they get into the military. And then those demons get worse while they're in. And so when they get out, they have that PTSD that they haven't dealt with this stuff.
Dealt with, yeah.
So
absolutely.
I would like, I'm not throwing it out there to put you on the spot, but I think you'd be good with dealing with helping vets deal with some issues, veterans who came home from different things, if you're up for something like that.
Yeah, that could be beautiful. I have worked with a few just in my coaching practice, but I think it would be a beautiful thing. Look, as human beings, I always say that we're all born free. You look at a child. A child, I think, is so innocent. They're so pure. They're in touch with their essence. That's why you look into a child's eyes, we melt, because we're reminded of who we were before all of the shit and the conditioning and life beat us up. And so a child is whole, perfect, and complete, and they're just radiating pure light, pure energy, pure sort of divinity. And what happens, though, is we're born and we incarnate into this human experience. We meet our parents. They're conditioned, carrying their own pain, their own hurt, their own stuff, most of which they may not even be aware of. So we're born into a preset framework of conditioning, of pain, of dysfunction, and we all have some level of it to a degree, whether we're aware of it or not. And so as these bright beings, as children, look, a child will jump on the table and sing and shout and doesn't care if it's not Bruno Mars, or doesn't care if it's fat. It's not so self-conscious, full of insecurities. A child is just being. And so as children, we're born, and maybe our parents they're fighting all the time, or there's divorce, or they're not emotionally present. They don't know how to meet our needs, or, maybe there's physical abuse, sexual abuse, mental, emotional traumas. And so two things happen that the conditioning process begins that we're often not aware of. The first thing is unconsciously we learn a strategy to shut down, disconnect, and not feel the pain of our environment. We start learning to shut down, disconnect, not feel, suppress that feeling so that we don't have to feel that pain. And we start erecting all sorts of defense mechanisms as a way to deal and cope with not having our needs met, cope with dad beating us, cope with mom not around. And so we start suppressing those feelings and erecting walls. And before you know it, we start disconnecting from a part of us that's already layer number one. Then we start learning a strategy of who do I need to be in order to get love, validation, and approval. For me as a young boy, being a preacher's kid, I learned I needed to be the perfect one, the good son, the responsible one, the caretaker. And so unconsciously, we all have these patterns because we start to contort ourselves without knowing into a certain shape of who we think we need to be in order to get love. Who does Ed need to be? Who does Kute need to be? So we start contorting ourselves, holding tightly into this shape in order to get love, validation, and approval. We start developing roles and masks and personas, and we become this person that we think we need to be to avoid pain, to get love. And we end up thinking this is who we are. And this is why people often say, no, it's just who I am. And I really ask people, is who you are who you really are? Is it who you really are? Who are you really? Or is it simply who you've been conditioned to be? Because most of us, we're living in a preset conditioning pattern that is not who we really are. It's just our conditioning. It's a pattern of conditioning that we learned, that we were sort of contorted into to avoid pain and get love. And so the degree to which we are conditioned is the degree to which we are not free. And the degree to which we're conditioned is the degree to which we don't have free will, free choice. We're just being run by our past conditioning without conscious awareness. And now we end up living inside of this sort of prison of persona, thinking it's who we are. I'm just this way. I'm just shy. I'm just, withheld. I'm like, I had a client, just to maybe paint a bit of a picture. I had a client who, him and his wife came to me. And his wife was very outgoing, very sort of outspoken. That's her. But this guy came to me and he says, Kute, I finally want to work with you. And he'd resisted for a while. And his thing was, he said, Kute, I'm just like he felt so much potential inside of him. He felt so much that he wanted to give. And he wasn't able to go to that next level of, let's say, succeeding in his own business. His wife had done well, but him of himself, he wasn't able to create a level of success. Now, to create success requires, to a certain degree, you're going to be visible. People will see you. You're going to have to be out there to a degree. And his whole identity was, I'm just shy. I'm just sort of behind the scenes. I don't need to be. I'm just shy. This is just who I am. Yet he felt more inside of him. And I looked at him the first time and I said, you're full of it. And you're lying to yourself. And you're acting. And you don't even know. I looked at him and I said, you are a lion pretending to be a mouse. And he looked at me a little offended. Like, what do you mean? I said, you're a lion pretending to be a mouse. So I took him on as a client. I took him on a very deep, intensive journey to India. We can talk about that later if you want. And on the journey, before we even started, the first day of the journey, we literally landed in India. And I look at him and I ask him some questions. And I get into his brain and his heart and his emotions. And I asked him some questions that stirred some things up for him that he'd suppressed. And he looks at me and he starts crying. He says, Kute, I've been crying for the last hour since you asked me those questions. And I can't stop crying. And I said, why? And he said, because I remember now when I was a child. I said, what do you mean? This is a 55-year-old man, hadn't cried since he was 5. He goes, I'm not emotional. I don't cry. I don't like attention. And he said, I remembered when I was 5. I said, what did you remember? He said, when I was 5. He goes, I remember that I was sexually abused by my uncle. And he's like, wow. He goes, I literally blocked this from my mind. I didn't even remember this. I didn't even know it happened. But as I've been thinking about your questions, I remembered what happened. And I remembered some of what happened. And it just tears, grief that he had suppressed, flowing out of his face, flowing out of his eyes. So much grief. And he said, I was molested by my uncle. And as we sat with that and we processed that and talked through this disconnect, this experience, what he realized was he unconsciously made up after that event, after that experience, something happened that should not have happened. He made up as a kid unconsciously, it's not safe to be seen. And if you see me, you can hurt me. So if I go into hiding and I'm quiet and I'm in the background, and I hide behind my wife, and I hide behind people, and I'm a, and I don't create waves. If you can't see me, you can't hurt me. And that was his defense mechanism and strategy for his entire life, in the background, blending into the wallpaper, being with a wife that was the one outgoing all the time. And so when he was able to acknowledge that, it was so healing. And so many of us, we're living inside of an identity and defense mechanisms that we're not even consciously aware of. And so I think part of the first step is we have to be willing to question who we are, to question ourselves, to question our beliefs, and to become aware of our patterns and our ways of being. Number one, awareness is the first step. Number two, we have to be willing to begin to feel those feelings, to have the safe space to feel the feelings that we've learned to suppress, because the defense mechanisms that we created as young children, as young adults, in our teens, at age 5, age 7, worked for us when we were 5, but often, and they help us be successful, but they often end up limiting us in other areas of our lives. And usually what I found is people get to a point where they hit the limit of our ego's capacity to create. It always has a limit. And so those defense mechanisms that we learn to create in order to not feel the pain, it can be very scary sometimes to then feel, because those mechanisms were created so that we never feel this pain again. And now we end up living life with this sort of straitjacket in this prison, because now I'm going to go into a relationship, I'm going to go get married, but I'm never going to feel that pain again. And then we're not able to give ourselves, we're not able to give our potential. And so awareness is the key. That's one of the first steps, and the willingness to feel those feelings.
How can people find you?
Oh, it's easy. A couple of things. I wrote a book called The Magic of Surrender. I think it walks people through a sort of a roadmap of transformation. You can go to Amazon, get the book.
You have a website?
Yeah, www.kuteblackson.com.
Okay.
And the paperback.
And then didn't you just write a new book? You want to talk?
The Magic of Surrender. The Magic of Surrender is the new book that just came out. It comes out
on Amazon.
The paperback comes out May the 3rd, and depending on when people listen to this interview, I'm doing a free event on May the 7th for those that
they won't make it by then.
You
have another one. You have another one after that one?
You can always get the paperback for sure.
Okay.
Get the paperback, and hopefully your life will be transformed.
Yeah, I'm sure you help a lot of people. I can just see it in you. And I appreciate you being on the show today. Anything else you want to put there before we go?
Yeah, look, if people want to go to the next level and they feel a calling, they've heard something from this interview. Twice a year, you ask, what do I do? Twice a year, I do an event in Bali for 12 days where I unplug people from the world, and I take you deep into yourself, and I take you through a 12-day systematic process of transforming. And that's the next one is in July 25th. Next one is in December. They can go to www.boundlessblissbali.com. And I would just love to wrap up by saying, if you listen to this conversation, I would like you to marinate on this. You are going to die. You are going to die. This is guaranteed. I want you to hold death close. Make death your friend. In so many ways in our culture, we try to avoid death, and we try to escape death, and we try to pretend, and we live like we're going to live forever. But the people in 9/11 had no idea that they weren't going to come home that night. The people in any natural sudden disaster had no idea that they weren't going to come home that night and look their loved ones in the eyes and say sorry and apologize and love fully. And the truth is, tomorrow is not guaranteed. And so if death came right now, are you ready? And if not, why not? What's unsaid? What's unforgiven? What's uncommunicated? What's unexpressed? And how would you need to live in such a way that if death came, you would have no regrets? Because when we die and we meet our maker, whatever you believe, you can't go to God and say, can I get a refund? Can I get a refund on those 2 years I wasted in that relationship that I knew wasn't right? Can I get a refund on those 5 years I worked in that career that I hated? Life is short. How would you need to live in such a way that you have no regrets? Feel your death, and use, not in a morbid way, but use the reality of death. We're all going to Buddha died, Bruce Lee died, Muhammad Ali died, Mandela died. We're going to die. And so hold death close as a wake-up call to live life even more authentically and fully.
And even Brandon Lee died.
Yeah.
That was the worst one. I'm sorry. That was the worst one. He was so young. He was just starting his thing. Yeah. Kute Blackson, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate it. Everybody go check him out. Go to his website, get his book, download it. And if you can, go to Bali in December. I think that's the best month to go there.
Awesome.
Right? I think that's the best month to go to Bali.
It's a great month.
Yeah. I think July is a little warm. Could be humid. I don't know. I could be wrong.
It's actually cooler in July now.
Is it cooler in July? All right. Go in July then. I was wrong. All right, sir. Thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate it. And everybody, if you like what we do here, just follow us like I always say. So thank you again, Kute.